Welcome again to my coverage of the 2035 Red Zone Blitz Draft. My name is Jamie, aka Squirrel, and in this video I'm going to look at some recent trades that have gone on during the third and fourth round of this draft, as well as look at some guys that are still on the board now, and we're in the sixth round now as I tape this. Some guys still on the board I like the look of. Also just want to say big thanks to Nick, big thanks to Joel for coming on to the last video, which was a live stream. I do need to iron out the tech there because I think the streaming was a bit more difficult than just making a video. I am completely new to this, lots to learn, but I will iron out the tech because it was a lot of fun. So I hope Nick and Joel found it fun. Really appreciate you guys coming on, guys. And I'd love to do that again because I found it really interesting. And so I'm going to go away and figure out how to make the technology better. For now though, this is just making a video a bit easier than streaming. Hopefully you guys can see this on the screen. We're sitting here now, it's the sixth round. The 10th pick is on the clock at the moment, which is Indianapolis. But before I come to the draft board and look at that, we've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 interesting trades in the middle rounds of this draft. And so I'm just going to look at them one by one, look at the value, look at the players. I think it's really interesting when people trade up for a player to look at that player and see what you think about it. It tells us something. If somebody trades up for a guy, they like him, and it's interesting to think, well, what did they like? And is that interesting? Is there something to learn from that? So let's have a look at these 6 picks. First one, Pittsburgh, trading up for the 14th pick of the third round and sending to Green Bay 2 future picks, a third round pick and a 6th round pick. So if we look at that on the trade value grid, and here we are, we've got Green Bay and Pittsburgh, and it's this trade here. So to start by looking at this trade here, we're going to look at all 6 very quickly. Here's the 14th pick of the third round being sent for the 26th and Pittsburgh sent the 26th and 26th because I value Rob's picks at the 26th pick because he's a playoff team. 2 future picks for a 14th pick in the third round, so pick 78. And if you look at it on the grid, the Jimmy Johnson grid would say, well, if you do that, you're sending about 157 points for 200 points. And that's the difference between those two is about a 5th rounder. So that's a pretty good value for just trading down. And on the Chase Stewart grid, it would be a lot closer together. So these 2 picks have been sent over for a 3rd rounder. Quite interesting because the future picks here, I think you would say are more valuable. This is quite a weak draft class. I didn't like rounds 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I do like 6 and 7, I'll come back to it. But you'd say, okay, this is quite a good trade to begin with, just on the picks, looking at it from the Green Bay perspective, just looking at the picks. But of course there's a player now because this 14th pick got turned into a player, and it's a fullback called Glaspie. So let's look at Glaspie. And if we just we can pick out all the guys that have been traded for here. These are the guys that have been traded for. So here is Glaspie, and Glaspie is a fullback, which is quite interesting, but he's a small fullback. So the weight 229, which is a small fullback with an interesting projection in the low 50s and high statics. My model says, well, Glaspie's an interesting one because my model thinks that Glaspie is an interesting running back conversion candidate, which is unusual. And we'll see in a minute when we look at the future picks. The Rob's traded up later on to get into the 4th round to try and get a running back. So clearly Rob came into this draft thinking about taking a running back, or maybe a fullback here is to be a running back, just to improve the runners on his roster, and the fullback, I guess, a blocker too. So that's quite interesting. And obviously one of the reasons people trade up often is for need in the middle rounds. People think, I'm going to get someone at such and such position. Maybe you see the board starts getting a little bit empty at the position you're targeting, and you think, well, I better do a trade up. You know, that's a standard technique, I guess, in front of us. Football. Maybe you've got 2 or 3 players in your board, you quite like 3 of them. One of them goes, you start thinking about trading up. The other one goes, you think, well, I've really got to trade up. So here we are. We've got this fullback. If you look at him, I think what's quite interesting, I'm comparing him to similar fullbacks here, and the blocking strength is really high. So blocking strength is an interesting one. It's the static for a fullback. And if you increase the static, then the probability of everything else being as you think it will be increases too. And sure enough, you've got a lot of fullbacks here. This one didn't meet his projection, but you've got one that pops and meets projection, and you've got a couple of guys do fairly well. Look, I think this guy will probably be a guy with ratings above 40, which is what you look for. Whether or not he's a serious candidate for conversion to running back, I think is a really interesting question. I think there's a chance that just as a fullback, he'll be a fairly interesting one of those. He's got some fullback characteristics that people very rarely use in front office football. So route running, very few people will throw it to the fullback ever. I don't know if Rob does that. And then this whole rec of 70. If this guy gets converted to running back, it'd be interesting to see if this whole rec survives, stays above say 50. That would be interesting. But all in all, trading up quite a lot of draft capital for a fullback there. It's quite an interesting move. I don't know how much fullbacks impact the game. I've not used them very much. I know of plenty of interesting game plans and people that focus on game plans that use fullbacks. So that's quite interesting to look at from a trade value perspective. So there's Glaspie, a fullback, and for the fullback you've got a future 3, future 6. Next one, I'm going to try and get through this quite quickly. We've got a linebacker called Bleak, and that's an Atlanta trade up. And just looking at the capital here, this is a 24th pick, and Atlanta sent a future 3rd. So again, bit less consideration, perhaps depends on how you value a Pittsburgh pick against an Atlanta pick. That's an interesting. I don't know. I just don't know the answer to that. But it looks on the face of it, this is a pretty even trade in terms of draft capital. And then if we look at Bleak, the linebacker, so Bleak is only 40 projection on the linebacker. So quite a low projection, although a high static. So people that go for high statics do tend to go hard for them. I think this is Wes Wright trading up. I think he's Atlanta here. This is a trade up for a guy with a high static and also a high percentage developed. So if this is a need guy, there's a need at this position, or a need maybe either now or anticipating in a year's time, you need the guy to develop, then you can see the logic for that. My model has this guy as a linebacker too, so kind of in the rotation, maybe kind of linebacker. So let's have a look at Bleak. And if you just look at him against some comparables, so this is, let's just do that. It's got itself a bit confused and keeps looking at fullbacks, which is not what I wanted to do. There we are. Okay, so if you look at this, the high static means a lot of these guys outperform the projection. So the projection's 40, and I think most players, the projection's normally a bit higher than what they end up. So just on the face of it, on the 40, you think, well, the guy might be a high 30s player, borderline, maybe not really a 3rd round pick just on the face of it. But if you look at these guys, you can get this guy's gone plus 10, this guy's gone -2, this guy's gone -6, but then +7, +9, +6, +9. Pretty unusual. That's unusual, but that's what you get when you get a good set of combines like this guy's got, and then you get a high static like this guy's got. He's got 2 high statics, in fact. His rush strength and punishing hitter are the statics for a linebacker. And I think, generally speaking, rush strength helps you with the rushing bars, and punishing hitter helps you with the coverage bars. And then I think that's just a general observation you can make. This guy's kind of unusual because his size is 240, so that's a coverage size linebacker really, as opposed to a sort of full-on front 7 guy. But if you then look at his bars, his coverage size, but he hasn't he's got actually that's a coverage bar, the zone bar. So maybe this is a coverage style linebacker. I don't really know how much the game values coverage linebackers. I just don't know. But that's what you're getting here. And so Bleak, he's going to need a little bit of luck in the reveal process, but if he gets it, I think mid to low 40s linebacker with some interesting looking bars, pretty well developed. I think a 3rd rounder is generous. I'd say that's a 4th for me, and maybe down into the 5th. But Wes likes him. This scouting that I'm looking at is not perfect. No scouting in front office football is, so could well be that Bleak is a decent serviceable linebacker. Right, next trade. This is Philadelphia trading up for Mazur, a wide receiver, and this trade sent another future 3rd. So a future 3rd here bought the 24th pick, a future 3rd here bought the 27th pick, and a future 3rd plus a 6th bought the 14th pick. So that was kind of the going rate in this draft. And I think a lot of the people that were trading away into the future, just because of the weakness of this draft, those guys were playing the percentages really. The people trading up probably were not playing the percentages. Doesn't mean they're going to make a mistake, doesn't mean they're wrong, but I think the percentages are probably running against them, and the guys who are trading into the future at this point in the draft, where I think the draft class was weak and the picks were not really getting great value, they probably were playing the percentages. You never know, next year's class might be a really good one. Right, this receiver, I've just got the big play here, the static, and I've just selected a bunch of guys in the sample with similar big play. This guy's got good downfield and route running bars, 69 and 60. The only slight concern I would have is that when you go over here and look, the guy's got a low static, albeit quite a good combine, 55 on my 0 to 100 combine scale, but the guy's got a low static, 29 and a half. People think that the big play and the static should correlate, and often they do, but they don't always. And here, a lot of guys here with big plays in the 20s and low 30s, they've got a range of statics which are higher, and in all of those instances where the combine's been higher but the big play's been lower, these guys haven't really met their projection. Here's the first, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 guys that look similar in my database. None of them hit projection. So although they all look like they had sort of interesting route running and downfield numbers here, if we go across and look at their real careers, let's see what we ended up with. Yeah, it's not really. None of those route running bars actually proved to be true. So my first look at Mazor, and look, I don't know everything about this game and neither does my model, but my first look at Mazor would be, I don't think that route running bar is going to come through. If it does, however, is well worth a third round pick, because a plus 50 or 50 or higher route running score is well worth a third round pick. But you know, and there's absolutely, if you're going to trade up for a position in this game, trade up for a wide receiver every time. That's absolutely, so in fact, in a funny kind of way, even though I don't think Mazor looks as good a player as Bleak, the linebacker, who's the trade up at the 24th pick in the third round, simply because it's a wide receiver, it doesn't have to be as successful a pick with the trade up. So there's a bit of a balance to strike there, and that's a view from me on positional value. I'm probably more skewed on that than most. Right, next one. So here, this is a trade up by the New York Giants. So that's Joel trading up with Nick to get the 30th pick in the third round, pick 94, and then the 22nd pick in the fourth round, which is pick 118. And the pick, although he's got 2 picks here, I only think you can obviously target the guy on the clock when you're doing it. And this was pick 94, which is turning into a linebacker called Velevis. So we look at Velevis. Here's Velevis, 242, same weight as Bleak, who was picked 6 picks in front. This guy comes with a way bigger projection. This guy's an interesting, just on the face of it, if you knew nothing else about this guy, you would say there's a 57 projection, there is a 40% developed on a young guy. So just with those things, you'd be like, okay, that actually looks really interesting, because that's, the combines are patchy. There's some good ones, there's some bad ones, and I think the statics are patchy too, because you've got a high punishing hitter, which again I think it skews to coverage, and then a low rush strength, which I think skews to rush. Now this is kind of interesting. The guy's got endurance. This is a really unusual prospect, because if it's right that punishing hitter skews to coverage, the coverage bars, they're okay. The rushing bars are better, but there's no PR strength. So I want to put this guy into the model, fix the pass rush strength, to this kind of level, and see if these players come out any good. So let's do that. We go over here, and let's have a look at Velevis against some comparables. Oh, hold on, his number. Yeah, we need his number. So here's Velevis. And okay, just on the face of it, before we look at the static, there are guys keeping to their projection, and there are low 60s guys here. Remember, Velevis got a pretty high projection in the high 50s, and so let's fix this strength down, because 23 is pretty low. So let's go for players that have got between 18 and 33. So I always do minus 10 plus 5. That's not what I've done there. Minus 10, which is 13, and then plus 5, which is 28. So this is players that have got similarly low pass rush strength. We come back. So look, you get looking at that gap between the projection and the total, minus 2, minus 9, minus 13, minus 9. minus 22. If this guy goes minus 22, that would be 35. All the rest of them is going to get, is going to be more than 40. If it was minus 13, then obviously that would be 57 going down to 44. So it looks on the face of it, but just look at this, you think, well, there's a decent chance of a starter here. And I think that's pretty interesting. There are guys in this top guy. Actually, let's just control for this weak combine on bench which is 20. So let's control for that, and just make sure that you get. Okay, you don't get many guys that really sort of look great that have got that kind of combine. Doesn't really happen. But I still think a high 40s outcome here is achievable. And if you've got high 40s and you've got the rushing bars, then okay, that's great. You're getting him in the wrong body shape because you've got a 240 guy really. So if you end up with a load of rushing bars, arguably it doesn't make a huge amount of sense. But with the youth and the percentage developed, you can see a lot of reasons to pick a guy like this. So let's see if that works out for Joel. Hope it does. So that's Valevis. Next one, trade up by Minnesota. This is Schubel, Guten Tag, Strubel. I'll try and do one of these videos in German. My German is awful, but I studied at school. Here's CB Webb. Let's have a look at him. Cornerback, trade up with a 4th and a 7th in this draft. So sent 6 points of Chase Stewart capital for 5.3. It's equivalent to sending an extra 7th rounder. It's pretty much a level 1. Although I'll come back in a minute, keep saying it, but I do like the 7th round here of this draft. But realistically, these drafts at that kind of level don't make massive amounts of value improvement up or down most of the time. Right, here's Webb. Webb's got a projection in the 50s. Let's go back actually. Webb's got a projection in the 50s, and he's got a really high percentage developed, which is normally a good sign. There's a couple of dangerous looking combines, and with this guy, I'm going to really focus on those combines because I think there's some interesting things to say about them. And because unlike in my previous videos, I've actually done some prep and looked at these players before the video. This guy's got low endurance, which for me, as a guy who hits recs and doesn't spend much time tinkering with depth charts, that's a problem. It would mean I wouldn't pick him, but that doesn't mean other people shouldn't. I see other than that, an over 40 static, which I think is a level which makes a lot of sense. Good bars everywhere else, low run defense, but we're talking about a cornerback, not a safety. And so with that high percentage developed, I can certainly see the logic for why there was a trade up here. I don't think there are that many other defensive backs on the board at this point. And if you wanted one, then I can totally see the logic for that. Going across and just looking at the players you're seeing and the comparables, look, you get 2 that bust out really, and then 1 that would be equivalent to end up with a low 40s, and then a couple that would be equivalent to getting sort of a decent. So look, you've got more than half a chance of getting a guy here that might start and be sort of better than 40 on the face of these numbers. Now look, on the combines, let's just look at that. So you got bench and you've got agility, and they're both below what they really ought to be. I think 40 is a level below which you have to start to be concerned on my 0 to 100 scale. Bench 25, agility 10. What we can do is we can look at bench 25, agility 10 on this. This is a grid, and let's see if I can make it bigger. So this is for cornerbacks, which is the position group we're looking at here. And this, what it does is it takes the combines on the 0 to 100 scale, which is what the y-axis is. Each combine, so you've got solosesmic, bench, broad jump, precision drill, agility, and 40. And if you've got a guy, depending on what his combine is, 0 to 100, then along the x-axis we've got what their maximum current rating turns out to be for a whole bunch of guys. And the reason why we're doing this is because we're going back to our guy Webb, who, where has he gone? Here is Webb here. So this is the guy that has just been taken in the draft after this trade up, cornerback Webb. He's got a bench of 25. What does that mean? Well, bench of 25, let's zoom right in on bench. Hang on. If you've got a bench of 25, what does it do to your maximum current rating? What are the chances, if you've got a bench of 25, that you can still play? Well, a couple things happen. You don't get any stars. Look over here. This is the maximum current rating of 60, 70, 80. You can't do that if you've got a bench of 25 and you're a cornerback. You just can't. Most of them bust. But then do you see this little gap? This gap's important. you get a cluster beyond the gap. There's something going on in the game's processes. If you can get beyond something in a dice roll, I don't know what it is, you'll get into starter. And when you're thinking about probability, and when you're thinking about combines, I think it's applying some sort of extra hurdle you have to clear for the player to be a starter. That's why I think the combines are worth looking at. But it is possible with a bench like this to be a starter. If you've got it, and by a starter I mean beyond 40 rating. For me, 40 rating is the sort of minimum for a starter, unless you're looking at positions where you've got a specific bar you want to have. So for example, we talked on the stream the other day with Nick, who showed us a player that would have a low overall rating, but because he had high pass rush technique potential as an edge rusher, that made loads of sense. With a cornerback, I don't think it's quite so easy. They need loads of different bars, and so I'm looking for an overall rating of 40 or better, more often than not. And here with this bench 25, it's just about doable. The other one is agility, I think on web. Let's go back to web. Now, agility is 10 on my 0 to 100 scale. 10 is really rather low. Let's see if you can have agility of 10 and you can get anywhere as a player in front office football 8. Well, this one's a bit more challenging. You see agility, you can see this kind of line. It's a lot more linear. You can see this line that sort of sets a limit. I'm trying to do it with the pointer, I hope you can see it. This line seems to be a kind of cutoff. It looks a bit more triangular shaped, this graph. And here's your 10. 10's here. So obviously you've got 0, you've got 20. Webb's got an agility combine of 10, it's in the middle. And if we look at it on a big database of players, you've got a couple of guys that edged into the low 40s, but not many others. This combine looks like it might be trouble for cornerback Webb. I hope it isn't. I hope that Struvel's got the right guy here. And do you know what? I don't think it's impossible, because I think there's a lot of good things to like about Webb, or particularly that high percentage developed for the age. That normally gives you a good shot, but don't be too surprised if when you get to the second round of the preseason, when the second phase of the reveal happens, if Webb's future rating takes a real pounding. Don't be surprised. I hope it doesn't, but don't be too surprised. Notwithstanding all of those things, I still quite like the trade up for a 4th round pick to have a real shot at getting a cornerback who might start. That's still pretty good value, and particularly in this bad draft class. And it's not like he's given up a huge amount of draft capital to do it. So that's cornerback Webb. Next one, Pittsburgh trading up for Gibson, who's a running back. And again, if you're talking about running backs, I think there's a bit of positional league going on here. Rob's already traded up for the fullback, and now we've got this running back. Look, running backs are simple in front office football for me. I don't spend ages agonising. I know this guy's got an 80 hole rec, which is 80 route running, which is interesting. Although at 225, for me, that's too big to move the receiver. But really, I'm just looking at hole rec. Is it high? It's high-ish, mid-60s. And then is one of the statics high? Well, speed, breakaway speed, no. Power inside, no. Speed to the outside, yes, okay. And then endurance, 25, that's a bit low. Look, Gibson, I wouldn't be trading it myself, but I'm sure Rob needs something. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's a receiving back. And if you guys that do game planning know about how to use receiving backs, I can totally understand how that might be more valuable than a running back anyway that isn't a receiving back. I don't really know anything about Gibson. If you're me and you hit Rex, then I just don't know. Well, the other thing I would say, this is 2 4th rounders for a 4 here. It's a lot of draft capital actually that's given up. That's a pretty good trade on the other side of the trade, just probabilities wide. And if it is true that Rob's looking for a running back, he's basically sent a future 3, a future 6, and 2 4s for a running back. And I just wonder whether there's a guy on a roster out there who's somebody's backup who's good enough to make it onto Rob's team and just do the running for the season, who could be got for a bit less than that capital. But I don't really know. So there you go. There's the trade-ups that I've looked at. I thought it was really interesting looking at those and which players were targeted. Right, so now back to the board, and I'm going to look at the whole board for a second because I've just taken all this board is live as at pick 167. Pick 167 is the most recent one I've got captured here, which is the 7th pick in the 6th round. So I'm looking at this board at the top of the 6th round, and I'm going to take off all the players that have been drafted so they can come off. So long as I can remember how to do it. Hold on. There we are. So those will all come off, and then I'm going to do it by projection. So there's quite a few projections here which are high, but there are not that many compete package players around. There's normally a reason why these guys that look like they've got high projections are here as we enter the 6th round. This is a guard that's got a low solid seismic score. These are linebackers that have got low statics. This is a linebacker that's got a low static, although quite interesting actually. Not for the young with a high percentage developed. That's probably an interesting player. I've picked out, however, a bunch of players I really like. I found 8 players left in this draft that I really like, and all of which I think are good value for a 6th or a 7th round pick. And I think if I was playing in this league, I would be trying to get picks at this point, and I would be trying to get as many of these guys on my roster as possible. Not because I think they're mega stars or even solid chances of being starters, but if you can get loads of these guys, I think taken together you're putting yourself in a good position by getting a lot of these guys. Because I think there's some interesting guys here. So just to run down them quickly, and then I'll finish up on this video. We'll start off with a safety, Newton. So Newton, here we are. So he is a guy with a low 50s projection. He's got a really low percentage developed, but he's very young to go with it. And he's got a high static. His problem is a low dash combine, but he's got a lot of other good things. So that floor is a problem, but let's have a look at other safeties that have got that problem, and then we'll go from there. So here's Newton, and Newton, on the face of it, looks interesting, but with that low combine. He's got a low zone defense, which is, he's meant to be a safety, but, he's at 194, he's really meant to be a free safety really, or maybe even converted to cornerback. So he's got a slightly unusual skill set. He's not really good at zone defense, but really he's kind of a free safety in size. That's a bit odd. Okay, but this isn't the NFL. This is the front office football. It's different. I think there's enough here for this guy to be a league average player. If anything like these bars converted into reality, I think it's completely possible for this guy to be a league average player. He's got endurance. He's got over the 40 on interceptions, which means he would get a couple of interceptions a season, potentially. He's got the high man-to-man bar, so even if it's not that unthinkable, this guy could go to corner, although not with that low dash maybe. And then if you just look at what you end up with between projection and actual over here, it looks all right. Now let's fix this combine and see if it all breaks when you do that, because it could well do. And the answer is, the probabilities get a lot worse, but they're still okay. You still get guys, you get the odd guy who stays 40, or that's not bad. At this kind of point in the draft, that's not bad. If I go back to this thing, now switch it to safety, and look at players with a 10, was it a 10 I think it was? It was a 10. Yeah, it was a 10. The flawed combine's a 10. Look at it here. Bunch from bust, loads and loads of guys bust. Then you get that gap. I like that gap. Because if you can somehow get the other side of the gap, you can be a 40s player. This guy's probably got a 50% chance. If you revealed this guy into the game 10 times, he probably is a plus 40 rating player, 5 out of 10. So that's great. That kind of probability for a 6th or 7th round pick is really, really good. So I like Newton. He's one I would pick, and I've given him a plus here. So we got pluses, and then we got plus. We got a plus if I like them more. And here's a plus on this guy, Manuel Leyva. Manuel Leyva is again a safety, and we'll put him in here. And let's just look at Leyva before I do that. So Leyva's got, I'll just make this a bit smaller. Leyva's got a no combine player, which I like a lot, down here. Not because I think it's makes them really amazing, but it just removes the potential for we don't know what this means, but generally speaking, I don't think this is a bad thing. I just think it's pretty neutral, and so it's not actively bad. The statics are weak. I happen to think that with defensive backs, it's the position where statics make the least difference. So I don't care as much as I might in some other positions. And then as we go across, the bars on this guy are pretty interesting. He's got the endurance bar, he's got an interceptions bar, he's got a weak static, he's got decent coverage bars, and he's got a run defense bar, which is good because he's quite a big safety. So I like all of that. That looks like he might be an interesting player. And then I go to this, and I compare him against a bunch of other guys, and you say, well, hang on a minute, there's quite a few starters there, and there's a few guys that pop. So I look at this and think, well, hang on a minute, this guy could be a high 40s or low 50s safety. It's not unthinkable. And if you got a player like that, that really could be a good player. I mean, this guy is far better than a 6th round pick in my view. This guy could easily be a 4th round pick. That's not unthinkable, even though he's got clear flaws. And now I've just controlled for the statics. I've taken everyone out of the sample that's got good statics. And even then, despite this fairly large bust guy, you get guys that stated projections, you've got a huge pop there, plus 17, and you've got another one there. So I like Laver. He's a plus pick in the 6th and 7th round for me. That's a value pick. If you're watching this video and there's draft still going on, go and pick Laver. That's a good pick. I like that one. Doesn't mean the player's going to be a definite starter or anything like that, not in the 5th or 6th or 7th round. But if in terms of playing the percentages, I like Laver a lot. Next one, defensive tackle, Mel Francis. Francis is very young again, 2014 draft year, and the 26% developed for a guy that young is promising. That's a good ratio, really favourable ratio. Francis then is a 300-pound guy with a low 50s projection, and he's fallen, defensive tackle. So for me, that's probably the second least valuable position in the game. I think the strong side linebacker as well is in that conversation. Not that I particularly know, but that's my guess. You can easily win the bowl game with bad defensive tackles and bad strong side linebackers. It doesn't seem to matter that much. These are good picks, because if you can get a starter in these positions, then you reduce your chances of making yourself think you need to go and spend a high pick on one in the future. Right, controlling the pass rush strength to be as low as this guy is fairly low. You still get guys who've hit their, don't want to do that. You still get guys, these two guys busted at the top, so these are low round picks I'm talking about. Don't expect miracles. But hey, look at this. You can get a lot of players who stick to their projection, who look like this guy. He's got a good set of combines, they're all absolutely fine. And then you've got a run D bar, and he's got the right size and he's got endurance. If this guy works out, then you don't have to think about a defensive tackle position for however long his rookie contract is. And as long as he hasn't performed that well, he'll probably be affordable in a second contract. And then you're getting massive cohesion because of 2014 player. Mel Francis, if he pans out, he's probably got a 50 or 60, maybe even 70% chance of working out. He's a decent player. He is a very good 6th or 7th round pick. Absolutely the kind to target. Again, I've given him a plus, like Francis a lot. Next one, Jackson Mikhailovich. Mikhailovich, all right, let's put him in. He's a tackle. He's also got a pretty high percentage developed, 54. That's pretty good for a 6th, 7th round pick. His draft year is older, but don't really care. And he's got some other interesting characteristics. He's got high solid seismic. I still don't really rate that or value that much on the D-line, but maybe you do. And I don't think that's wrong. I just don't know. And here we are. So here's Mikhailovich. He's not as promising as the guys we've just looked at by any stretch, but he's still a plus for me. Let's again control for the pass rush strength, which I think at this position group matters and helps. And you want to make sure you don't have to have it by any means, but if it's there, particularly when the other stuff's less promising. This guy's got endurance 40, just enough. He's got plenty of busts on the record. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3, but there's a pop too, bit of offset. That's a pop, that's a pop. Don't know why, but he's just high variance guy. There are people here with similarly bad broad jump combine. There aren't that many people here with similarly bad bench, actually. Let me just look at that. I haven't looked at that. Oh wow, look at that. If you've got low bench like this guy, that helps. There must be fake bench guys. Maybe that's a thing in the game. I don't know. In fact, there's a lot of pops here. That's really interesting because this guy's got a pass rush bar as well. There we go. So this guy had 60. Here's an example of a guy that looks a bit like this guy. He had the same kind of PR strength. He had a lot of other characteristics similar. There's his pass rush tech bar, 68. Our guy's 73. Call it 68. His real one was 92. Yeah, okay. I'd be picking Mikhailovich as well. Worth trading up. If you can get a 6th round pick, you're watching this video, still on the board, go and get one. Try players like this. These are good picks. These are really good picks, actually, for this kind of value. Next one, Asher Carter. He's a defensive end. I've got plus again. Let's have a look at what you get with this guy. So we go again, as we're doing, I keep doing it, but just to remind you, I'm trying to bring this page is all about similarity. I've got a database of players down here, and what I'm doing is I'm just re-ranking this database to give me the players most similar to the player I've put at the top here. This player at the top is called Asher Carter. He's available in the 6th round of this draft. So he's a defensive end, and he's 290, so he's quite a big defensive end in a 4-3. He'd be a very small tackle. He probably wouldn't convert to tackle. He's young, but with 17%. He has got a decent pass rush strength, static bar, and a high PR tech. Let's have a look at what happens to guys like this with this kind of PR strength bar. And then here we go. Right, so they tend to minus out, but this guy didn't. We're talking with a PR tech bar, one of the most valuable bars in front office football, in my view. It's not necessarily a view that I can hugely substantiate, but I think that there's a pretty high likelihood that that's right. These guys then had 80s, 70s, 80s like this guy. How many of them stuck out in their real careers? That's what this thing is telling you. Here we go, 90, 60, 70, 25, all right, 70, 20, 100, 96. Very interesting. A lot of these guys kept enough endurance to stay on the field. There is a chance that this guy becomes a good rushing player, probably on your number 2 guy. There's probably there's maybe not a half chance of that, but there is a close to a half chance of that. To get a rusher like that in the 6th or 7th round pick is huge amounts of value. I have Carter as a plus. I like that one. Next one, Lauritsen, tackle, 2 pluses again. I've got him as plus. He is a high 40s projection. He's got mixed statics, but there's something there. He's got some up and down combines. He's got sort of moderate development and moderate age. So he is a D-tackle as well. There's quite a few D-tackles that are this far down the board. D-tackle is a great position to target. And here's Lauritsen. And looking just straight at this and the comparables, quite a few of them slightly improve on their projection. Bit of a surprise again. Something about this guy's bars that my model likes, that past comparables seem to ground out as helpful. Don't know why. That's when people in front of us talk about the shape of the bars. This guy's got a decent shape of bars. He's got a high run D bar. And this could be a cheap run D bar. Plenty of evidence here to suggest there's a chance of that. Could bust out. This is a 6th round pick kind of guy. But even guys with the low dash. So here we go. This guy's got low dash like here. Yeah, there's a chance this guy Lauritsen is a cheap, high run D bar. And then I'm trying to remember if there was endurance too. I think there's 40. So 40 is not great, but it's just enough. This guy could be a serviceable D-tackle guy. Not a depth guy. This guy would become a starter soon enough if he reveals like it looks like he could. And again, there's I'd say better than half chance of that happening. Quite like Lauritsen. I like the other guys I've got as plus up here, Lever and Francis more. But Carter and Lauritsen I like too. Next one. Defensive end Hansen, but he's not an end really because he's 300 pounds, so he's a tackle. He's 2013 draft year, which is young, and he's got good development for that year again. So another plus like that, and he's got a low 40s projection. You look across and go, well, he's got a 0 dash. 0 dash for an end. Nah, don't like that. Dash is rushing, don't like that. But remember, this guy is a tackle really. He's hidden. So let's go and have a look and see what that does. What can we get there? What can you get from a guy if you just sort of think, well, he's not going to rush for you, but he could stop the run? What does that do? Well, if we look at this, you've got a couple of minuses, but you've got a couple of huge pops with this profile. A couple of huge pops. And hold on, the huge pop guys have got the 0. So we're just going to set that to 0. The 0 seems to help. It's high variance, no doubt. But there's plenty of guys here with this 0 that it ends and the game likes them. The reveals are kind to these guys. Some of the time, not all of the time. We've got high endurance. We've got high enough run D here. And we've got players here. Admittedly, the ones that pop seem to have really high run D. So if you look at that, you've got guys with 80, and those are the ones popping. So if this guy had really high run D, like like a plus run D, it was basically a maxed out bar, you'd be thinking, yeah, we are really onto something. As it is, I'm muting those expectations back, but still for a 6th or a 7th round pick, this guy is a worthwhile attempt, and this guy's got a high static too. So if we then control for the static, do that. So now we've got the static guy and the agility. You do get guys that are starter caliber. You don't get loads of them, but you get them. I think Hansen's a decent attempt at a tackle conversion. And then the last one's Pinner. I talked about Pinner in a previous video. I'm not going to go into the reasons, the whys and wherefores now. But Pinner looks like an interesting guy as well, on the basis that he is a quarterback, so the most valuable position of all, alongside potentially wide receiver, maybe more valuable even than that. And I quite like Pinner's bars. I just think they look okay. I think there's a usable quarterback in there. I don't think there's a huge probability of it, but if I'm watching this and I haven't got a quarterback at all, and I've got a spare 6th or 7th round pick, I'd consider taking Pinner and just putting him in and seeing what happens, because there's a chance that he'll develop. He's got a high adjusted grade, which is not something I look at hugely, but I do look at it for quarterbacks. I do think it matters for quarterbacks. And there's just something about Pinner, I don't know, a bit more instinctive than analytical, but I think it'd be interesting. He'd have a really low overall rating. It'd probably be 25 or 30, but I've seen quarterbacks like this work. This for me is the second best quarterback in this draft, which I reckon is a bit of a hot take. There are much better quarterbacks by bars. But if you're asking me which quarterback I think is the most likely to succeed, there's the guy who went with the 1-1, is obviously the most likely. But the second most likely for me is this guy, Pinner, and he's still on the board as we enter the 6th round. So there we go, there's a bunch of picks that I like in the 6th and 7th round of this 2035 Red Zone Blitz draft. I just want to say a huge thanks to anyone who's been paying any attention to this, because I've got an enormous amount of feedback and it's been pretty cool. The French football community is really cool. The Red Zone Blitz community is really cool. So I've been learning a lot by doing this. I hope that there's stuff in this that is interesting that others can see. Maybe there's some stuff in here you haven't thought about before. Another thing just to say, if you're in another league and you thought this was cool and you're watching this and you think this is something you'd like to see in your league, I'm not going to make a habit of doing this all the time, but I might be tempted to do another league for this, because I mean it's a good 6 weeks between drafts for this league, Red Zone Blitz. I'm kind of half tempted to do one in the GML, which is the league I used to play in. I don't think I'm going to be playing anytime soon, but I am quite interested in just from time to time having a look at this. So just give me a shout. You can probably reach me either on GML or Red Zone Blitz or FOFC as well, the forum. I'm squirrel on all of those. So if you want to get in touch, just do that. Anyway, thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you another time.